Hello and welcome to this quiet corner of the internet where science meets wonder. Before we begin our gentle journey together, here's something that might surprise you. Every single manifestation teacher who claims quantum physics supports their methods is fundamentally misunderstanding the most precisely tested theory in all of human history. The very science they invoke actually explains why their techniques can't work the way they claim. I'm glad you're here, whether you're settling for the evening, taking a contemplative break, or simply curious about the intersection of quantum reality and human consciousness. Tonight, we're going to explore a fascinating paradox that sits at the heart of modern spirituality and science. We'll discover why the quantum world, despite its mysterious and counterintuitive nature, doesn't actually support the reality-bending claims of manifestation culture. But more than that, we'll uncover what quantum physics truly reveals about the nature of reality, consciousness, and the beautiful complexity of being human in a quantum universe. This isn't about dismissing wonder or destroying hope. It's about finding authentic awe in what the universe actually offers us, rather than what we might wish it could provide. As we move through this exploration together, you might find yourself questioning long-held beliefs, and that's perfectly natural. Sometimes the most profound growth comes from gently releasing ideas that no longer serve us, making space for deeper truths to emerge. If you find these thoughtful explorations meaningful, I'd be grateful if you considered subscribing and letting me know in the comments where in the world you're listening from tonight. These conversations reach people in quiet moments across the globe, and there's something beautiful about that shared contemplation. Now let's begin our journey into the quantum realm, where reality is far stranger and more wonderful than any manifestation guru could imagine. Picture this. You're sitting in a coffee shop, overhearing a conversation at the next table. Someone is explaining with great confidence how they manifested their dream job by collapsing quantum wave functions with their focused intention. They're using words like quantum field, observer effect, and vibrational frequency, with the authority of someone who's watched a few YouTube videos and read a popular book on the topic. This scene plays out thousands of times every day across the world. The language of quantum physics has been borrowed, reshaped, and repurposed to support a multi-billion-dollar industry built on the promise that our thoughts can directly reshape reality through quantum mechanical processes. It sounds sophisticated, scientific, and empowering. The only problem is that it's not true. But here's what's fascinating. The misunderstanding isn't malicious. It emerges from a genuine human desire to find meaning, control, and hope in an often chaotic world. The quantum realm does offer us something profound, just not what the manifestation industry claims it does. As you listen to this, take a moment to consider your own relationship with these ideas. Have you ever found yourself drawn to the notion that consciousness might directly influence reality at the quantum level? There's no judgment here, only curiosity about how we navigate the space between wonder and wishful thinking. The story of how quantum physics became entangled with manifestation culture begins in the early 20th century, when brilliant minds like Max Planck, Albert Einstein, Niels Bohr, and Werner Heisenberg began uncovering the bizarre behaviour of matter and energy at the smallest scales. What they discovered was so counterintuitive, so alien to our everyday experience, that even they struggled to make sense of it. Einstein himself famously declared that God does not play dice with the universe, expressing his discomfort with the probabilistic nature of quantum mechanics. Bohr responded that perhaps Einstein shouldn't tell God what to do. This tension between our intuitive understanding of reality and quantum mechanical behavior created a gap that would later be filled with speculation, misinterpretation, and well-meaning but scientifically unfounded theories about consciousness and reality. The quantum world operates according to principles that seem to mock our common sense. Particles exist in multiple states simultaneously until measured. Entangled particles influence each other instantaneously across vast distances. The very act of observation appears to change the behavior of quantum systems. These phenomena are real, measurable, and form the foundation of technologies we use every day, from computer chips to medical imaging devices. But somewhere along the way, these strange quantum properties became metaphors for human potential rather than descriptions of physical reality. The idea that observation changes quantum behavior was extrapolated to suggest that human consciousness can reshape reality through focused intention. The concept of quantum superposition, where particles exist in multiple states until measured, was interpreted as evidence that we can choose which reality we experience. This leap from quantum mechanics to manifestation psychology represents what philosophers of science call a category error, applying principles that govern the behavior of subatomic particles to complex biological and psychological systems. It's like trying to understand ocean currents by studying how individual water molecules behave, or attempting to predict human behavior by analyzing the quantum states of neurons. Let's dive deeper into one of the most misunderstood concepts in all of quantum physics: the observer effect. This phenomenon has become the cornerstone of quantum manifestation theory, yet its actual meaning is quite different from what popular culture suggests. The famous double-slit experiment serves as the foundation for many manifestation claims. In this experiment, particles like photons or electrons are fired at a barrier with two parallel slits. When both slits are open and no measurement is made to determine which slit each particle passes through, an interference pattern emerges on a screen behind the barrier, suggesting that each particle somehow passes through both slits simultaneously and interferes with itself. However, when a detector is placed at one of the slits to observe which path each particle takes, the interference pattern disappears and the particles behave as if each one went through only one slit. This is the observer effect, and it's often presented as evidence that consciousness can directly influence physical reality. But here's where the interpretation goes astray. The observer in quantum mechanics doesn't need to be conscious. It doesn't need to be human. It doesn't even need to be alive. The observer effect occurs whenever any physical system interacts with the quantum system being measured, causing what physicists call decoherence. Imagine you're trying to measure the position of an electron using light. To see where the electron is, you need to bounce photons off it. But those photons carry energy and momentum, and when they interact with the electron, they inevitably disturb its state. The measurement itself becomes a physical interaction that affects the system. This disturbance happens regardless of whether any conscious being is watching. If you set up a completely automated detector that records which slit a particle passes through, with no human ever looking at the results, the interference pattern still disappears. The quantum state collapses due to the physical interaction with the detector, not because of conscious observation. As you contemplate this, notice how it shifts the entire foundation of quantum manifestation theory. The observer effect isn't about consciousness reshaping reality through focused intention. It's about the fundamental impossibility of measuring a quantum system without disturbing it through physical interaction. This misunderstanding has profound implications for how we think about the relationship between mind and matter. While consciousness is undoubtedly mysterious and worthy of scientific investigation, quantum mechanics doesn't provide evidence that thoughts can directly manipulate physical reality at the fundamental level. The confusion likely arises from early interpretations of quantum mechanics, particularly the Copenhagen interpretation developed by Niels Bohr and Werner Heisenberg. This framework suggested that quantum systems exist in superposition, experiencing all possible states simultaneously until the act of measurement forces them to choose a definite state. Some early physicists, including Eugene Wigner, speculated about whether consciousness might play a special role in this process. Wigner proposed what became known as the consciousness causes collapse interpretation, suggesting that quantum wave functions don't collapse until observed by a conscious mind. However, Wigner himself later abandoned this idea as our understanding of quantum mechanics evolved. The scientific consensus has moved far beyond these early speculations. Modern physics recognizes that decoherence, the process by which quantum superpositions break down due to environmental interactions, occurs constantly and doesn't require conscious observers. Every interaction with the environment, from collisions with air molecules to thermal vibrations, can cause wave function collapse. This understanding reveals something beautiful about the quantum world. Rather than being a realm where human consciousness reigns supreme, it's a domain governed by precise mathematical laws that describe how information and energy flow through physical systems. The equations of quantum mechanics are among the most accurately tested theories in all of science, making predictions that match experimental results to more than 10 decimal places. Here's where the quantum manifestation story encounters its most fundamental obstacle: the problem of scale. Quantum effects, with all their strange and wonderful properties, occur primarily at the subatomic level. As we move from individual particles to atoms, molecules, cells, and eventually to human beings, these quantum behaviors become increasingly irrelevant to the macroscopic world we inhabit. This transition from quantum to classical behavior isn't arbitrary. It's governed by well-understood physical processes that make quantum coherence nearly impossible to maintain in warm, noisy, biological systems like human brains. The very conditions that would be necessary for consciousness to directly manipulate quantum states simply don't exist in living organisms. Think of it this way. Imagine trying to maintain a perfectly still pond while a thunderstorm rages overhead. The delicate quantum states that manifestation theory requires would be like ripples on that pond's surface, instantly disrupted by the constant thermal motion, electromagnetic activity, and biochemical processes happening in biological systems. Your brain contains roughly 86 billion neurons, each one a complex electrochemical system generating heat, electrical activity, and molecular motion. This warm, wet, electrically active environment is the polar opposite of the isolated, ultra-cold conditions typically required to observe and manipulate quantum effects in laboratory settings. The concept physicists use to describe this transition is called decoherence. It explains how quantum superpositions, those exotic states where particles exist in multiple configurations simultaneously, rapidly break down when they interact with their environment. In biological systems, decoherence happens so quickly that quantum effects become negligible almost instantly. This doesn't mean quantum mechanics is irrelevant to biology. Quantum effects do play crucial roles in certain biological processes, from photosynthesis to possibly even some aspects of consciousness itself. But these are highly specialized, evolved systems that nature has carefully tuned over millions of years to exploit specific quantum phenomena under precisely controlled conditions. The idea that untrained human consciousness could deliberately harness these effects to manifest material outcomes represents a misunderstanding of both the precision required and the environmental constraints involved. It would be like expecting someone to perform brain surgery with oven mitts while riding a roller coaster. As you reflect on this, consider how it reframes our relationship with the quantum world. Rather than being a realm we can consciously control, it's a fundamental layer of reality that operates according to its own rules, largely independent of our desires or intentions. This isn't a limitation of human potential, it's simply a recognition of how different scales of reality operate according to different principles. The manifestation industry often responds to this scale problem by invoking concepts from thermodynamics, particularly the idea of entropy. Proponents suggest that organizing our thoughts and emotions can somehow lower our personal entropy and influence quantum probability waves. But this represents another category error, mixing metaphors with physics in ways that don't hold up to scientific scrutiny. Entropy, in the scientific sense, is a precise measure of disorder in physical systems like gases or heat engines. It has nothing to do with the organization of thoughts, emotions, or personal habits. Your mental state isn't a closed thermodynamic system that follows the laws of statistical mechanics. This kind of conceptual confusion reveals something important about how scientific language gets misappropriated. Terms like energy, frequency, vibration, and quantum field have specific technical meanings in physics, but they sound profound and mysterious enough to be repurposed for spiritual or self-help contexts. The result is a vocabulary that sounds scientific but lacks the precision and rigor that makes science reliable. Take a moment to breathe and consider what this means for your own understanding. The quantum world is indeed mysterious and awe-inspiring, but its mystery lies in its mathematical elegance and experimental precision, not in its supposed malleability to human consciousness. This precision is actually one of the most beautiful aspects of quantum mechanics. When physicists use quantum theory to calculate properties like the magnetic moment of an electron or the energy levels of atoms, their predictions match experimental measurements to extraordinary accuracy. This isn't a vague, mystical science that bends to human will. It's an incredibly precise tool for understanding how the universe works at its most fundamental level. The founders of quantum mechanics, including Einstein, Bohr, Heisenberg, and Schrödinger, were deeply aware of the philosophical implications of their discoveries. They engaged in extensive debates about the nature of reality, measurement, and observation. But these discussions were grounded in mathematical formalism and experimental evidence, not in wishful thinking about consciousness creating reality. Einstein, despite his discomfort with quantum indeterminacy, never suggested that human thoughts could influence quantum outcomes. Schrödinger's famous cat thought experiment was designed to highlight the absurdity of applying quantum superposition to macroscopic objects, not to suggest that consciousness determines reality. As we continue our exploration, we'll discover how the genuine mysteries of quantum mechanics offer something far more profound than the false promises of manifestation theory. The real quantum world reveals a universe of incredible complexity, beauty, and interconnectedness that doesn't require conscious control to be meaningful. We'll explore how the placebo effect and confirmation bias create the illusion of manifestation success, why quantum entanglement doesn't support claims about consciousness connection, and what the actual relationship between mind and matter might look like when viewed through the lens of rigorous science. The journey ahead will take us through the landscape of human psychology, the precision of quantum experiments, and the beautiful complexity of a universe that operates according to discoverable principles rather than wishful thinking. Along the way, we might find that reality, as it actually exists, is far more wonderful than any reality we could consciously create. In our next segment, we'll examine how quantum entanglement, one of the most genuinely mysterious phenomena in physics, gets misappropriated to support claims about universal consciousness and long-distance manifestation. We'll discover why this, as Einstein called it, spooky action at a distance, actually reinforces the boundaries of what consciousness can accomplish, rather than expanding them. But before we continue, if you're finding this exploration provoking, I'd be grateful if you share your thoughts in the comments. Where do you find yourself in this conversation between scientific precision and human hope? And if this kind of contemplative science resonates with you, you might enjoy our previous exploration. We asked the universe the big questions and got terrifying answers, where we delved into some of the most profound questions physics has revealed about the nature of existence itself. As we settle deeper into our exploration, let's turn our attention to perhaps the most misunderstood and misappropriated phenomenon in all of quantum physics: entanglement. This is where the manifestation industry has built some of its most compelling yet scientifically unfounded claims about consciousness connecting us all through invisible quantum threads. Picture two particles that have interacted and become entangled. These particles, even when separated by vast distances, remain mysteriously correlated. When you measure one particle and find it spinning in a particular direction, you instantly know the spin of its entangled partner, no matter how far away it might be. Einstein famously called this spooky action at a distance, and it troubled him deeply because it seemed to violate the speed of light as a universal limit. This genuine quantum phenomenon has been verified countless times in laboratory settings. It's not science fiction or wishful thinking. Quantum entanglement is real, measurable, and forms the basis for emerging technologies in quantum computing and cryptography. The spookiness Einstein worried about has become one of the most precisely understood aspects of modern physics. But here's where things go astray in popular interpretations. The manifestation industry has taken this remarkable property of paired particles and extrapolated it into a grand theory of universal consciousness connection. They suggest that because particles can be entangled, human minds must be similarly connected through some kind of quantum field that allows our thoughts to influence distant events and other people's experiences. This leap from particle physics to human psychology represents a fundamental misunderstanding of what entanglement actually does and doesn't do. As you consider this, notice how appealing the idea is. There's something beautiful about imagining ourselves connected to all of existence through invisible quantum threads, able to send healing thoughts or manifest outcomes through this mystical network. The reality, however, is both more mundane and more fascinating. Quantum entanglement between particles is an extremely fragile phenomenon that requires very specific conditions to create and maintain. The particles must first interact in a controlled way, then be carefully isolated from their environment to prevent decoherence. Any interaction with the outside world, including measurement, breaks the entanglement. More importantly, entanglement cannot be used to send information or influence outcomes in the way manifestation theory suggests. When you measure an entangled particle, you get a random result. You can't choose what value you'll observe or use your measurement to send a message to someone measuring the partner particle. The correlation is there, but it's not controllable. This is crucial to understand. Quantum entanglement demonstrates correlation without communication or control. The particles are connected in their properties, but this connection can't be harnessed to transmit information or influence events. It's like having two coins that always land on opposite sides when flipped, no matter how far apart they are, but you can't control which side your coin will show. The idea that human consciousness could create or maintain quantum entanglement faces even more fundamental obstacles. Our brains are warm, wet, electrically noisy environments where entanglement would be destroyed almost instantaneously by decoherence. The thermal energy alone would be sufficient to break any quantum correlations that might theoretically form between neurons. Some researchers have speculated about quantum effects in biological systems, particularly in areas like photosynthesis, where nature seems to exploit quantum coherence under very specific conditions. But these are highly evolved, specialized molecular machines that operate under carefully controlled circumstances. They're nothing like the free-form consciousness connection suggested by manifestation theory. As you reflect on this, consider how it changes our understanding of human connection and influence. We are indeed connected to each other and to the universe, but through mechanisms far more complex and beautiful than simple quantum entanglement. Our connections flow through shared experiences, cultural transmission, emotional resonance, and the countless ways our actions ripple outward through social and environmental systems. These connections are real and powerful, but they operate through classical physics and psychology rather than quantum mechanics. When someone's mood affects the people around them, it's not because of entangled consciousness, when in fact it's mirror neurons, body language, vocal tones, and the countless subtle ways we communicate and influence each other through entirely normal biological and social processes. The misappropriation of entanglement language in manifestation culture reveals something important about how we process scientific information. Complex phenomena get simplified into metaphors, and those metaphors eventually become literal beliefs. But the quantum connection language of entangled consciousness sounds profound and meaningful, but it loses the precision that makes science reliable. Here's something that might surprise you about quantum mechanics. It's probably the most precise scientific theory ever developed by human beings. This vague, intention-based precision stands in stark contrast to the V-based reality suggested by manifestation teachings, where thoughts allegedly alter quantum states to produce desired outcomes. When physicists use quantum mechanics to calculate properties like the magnetic moment of an electron, their theoretical predictions match experimental measurements to more than 10 decimal places. To put this in perspective, imagine measuring the distance from New York to Los Angeles and being accurate to within the width of a human hair. That's the level of precision we're talking about. This extraordinary accuracy isn't accidental. It emerges from the mathematical rigor that underlies quantum theory. The equations of quantum mechanics don't leave room for wishful thinking or personal interpretation. They describe probabilistic relationships with mathematical certainty, predicting exactly how likely different outcomes are under specific conditions. Take a moment to breathe and consider what this means. The quantum world isn't a mystical realm where anything is possible if you believe hard enough. It's a domain governed by precise mathematical laws that describe how information and energy flow through physical systems. The randomness that appears at the quantum level isn't chaos. It's structured uncertainty that follows exact statistical patterns. This precision directly contradicts one of the fundamental claims of quantum manifestation theory, that reality is fluid and malleable to human consciousness. If quantum mechanics supported the idea that focused intention could alter physical outcomes, we would expect to see variations in experimental results based on the beliefs or desires of the researchers. But we don't. Quantum experiments produce the same statistical results, regardless of who performs them or what they hope to find. The Heisenberg uncertainty principle, often cited by manifestation advocates as evidence that reality is fundamentally uncertain and therefore controllable by consciousness, actually describes precise mathematical limits on simultaneous measurement of complementary properties like position and momentum. It's not about reality being vague or uncertain in a general sense. It's about specific, measurable trade-offs between different types of information. When Werner Heisenberg first formulated this principle, he wasn't suggesting that human consciousness determines physical reality. He was describing a fundamental feature of quantum systems that emerges from their wave-like nature. You can know exactly where a particle is or exactly how fast it's moving, but the more precisely you measure one property, the less precisely you can know the other. This isn't mysticism, it's mathematics. The founders of quantum mechanics were deeply aware of the philosophical implications of their work. They engaged in extensive debates about the nature of reality, measurement, and observation. Niels Bohr and Albert Einstein carried on a decades-long discussion about whether quantum mechanics provided a complete description of reality. But these conversations were grounded in experimental evidence and mathematical formalism, not in speculation about consciousness creating reality. Einstein, despite his discomfort with quantum indeterminacy, never suggested that human thoughts could influence quantum outcomes. His famous quote about God not playing dice with the universe expressed his belief that there might be hidden variables underlying quantum randomness, not that consciousness could control quantum events. Even his objections to quantum mechanics were based on scientific reasoning about the nature of physical reality. As you contemplate this precision, notice how it reframes our relationship with uncertainty. The quantum world does contain genuine randomness, but it's not the kind of randomness that human will can influence. It's more like the randomness of a perfectly fair coin flip, where each individual outcome is unpredictable. But the long-term statistical behavior follows exact mathematical patterns. This structured uncertainty actually reveals something profound about the nature of reality. The universe operates according to discoverable principles that don't depend on our beliefs, desires, or intentions. This isn't a limitation of human potential, it's the foundation that makes reliable knowledge possible. If physical laws changed based on what we wanted to be true, science itself would be impossible. The precision of quantum mechanics has practical implications that touch your life every day. The computer or phone you're using to access this content depends on our precise understanding of quantum behavior in semiconductors. Medical imaging techniques like MRI rely on quantum properties of atomic nuclei. GPS satellites require corrections based on quantum effects to maintain their accuracy. These technologies work because quantum mechanics is precise and predictable, not because it's mystical and controllable by consciousness. The same mathematical principles that manifestation advocates claim support their theories actually form the foundation of our modern technological civilization. Now, let's explore something fascinating about human psychology. Why so many intelligent, well-meaning people find quantum manifestation theories compelling despite their scientific implausibility. Understanding this isn't about judgment, it's about recognizing the deeply human needs these theories attempt to address. The appeal of quantum manifestation lies partly in what psychologists call the illusion of control. Humans have evolved to seek patterns and causal relationships, even where none exist. When random events occur in our favour, we naturally want to believe we somehow influence them. When things go wrong, we search for explanations that restore our sense of agency and control. Quantum mechanics, with its emphasis on observation and measurement, seems to offer scientific support for this desire for control. The idea that consciousness can collapse wave functions to create desired outcomes provides a seemingly rational explanation for the ancient human belief that focused intention can shape reality. But here's where psychology intersects with physics in unexpected ways. Much of what people attribute to quantum manifestation can be explained by well-understood psychological phenomena like the placebo effect, confirmation bias, and selective attention. These mechanisms are real, measurable, and genuinely powerful, but they operate through classical, psychological, and physiological processes rather than quantum mechanics. As you listen to this, take a moment to examine your own experiences with intention and outcomes. Have you ever noticed that when you really want something to happen, you become more aware of opportunities and possibilities that were always there, but previously overlooked? This heightened awareness isn't quantum mechanics at work. It's your brain's natural pattern recognition system becoming more sensitive to relevant information. The placebo effect demonstrates just how powerful the connection between expectation and experience can be. When people believe they're receiving an effective treatment, their subjective experience often improves even when the treatment has no direct physiological effects. This isn't because consciousness is manipulating quantum fields. It's because the brain's prediction systems influence how we perceive and respond to our circumstances. Confirmation bias plays an equally important role in creating the illusion of manifestation success. When we believe strongly in something, we naturally pay more attention to evidence that supports our belief, while minimizing or ignoring contradictory information. This selective attention creates a feedback loop where apparent successes are remembered and celebrated, while failures are forgotten or explained away. Think about how this might work in practice. Someone decides to manifest a new job using quantum techniques. They visualize success, maintain positive thoughts, and focus their intention on the desired outcome. Over the following weeks, they notice several job-related opportunities, a networking event they might have otherwise skipped, a conversation with a colleague about openings in their field, an online posting they happen to see. Eventually, they get a job offer. From their perspective, the manifestation worked. They focused their intention, and reality responded. But from a psychological perspective, what likely happened is that their heightened attention to employment opportunities made them more likely to notice and act on possibilities that were always present in their environment. This doesn't diminish the value of positive thinking, goal setting, or maintaining an optimistic outlook. These practices can genuinely improve outcomes by influencing behavior, motivation, and social interactions. The problem arises when we attribute these real psychological effects to imaginary quantum processes. The distinction matters because misunderstanding the mechanism can lead to unrealistic expectations and self-blame. If you believe your thoughts directly control quantum reality, then any failure to manifest desired outcomes becomes a personal failing rather than a natural consequence of living in a complex world where many factors beyond your control influence outcomes. Research in psychology shows that people who maintain an internal locus of control, believing their actions can influence their circumstances, tend to be more resilient and successful than those who feel powerless. But this beneficial effect doesn't require belief in quantum manifestation. It emerges from the practical advantages of taking responsibility for what you can control while accepting what you cannot. As you reflect on these ideas, consider how they might apply to your own relationship with intention and outcome. The human capacity for hope, visualization, and positive thinking represents genuine strengths that can improve your quality of life and effectiveness in pursuing goals. These capacities don't need quantum mechanical validation to be valuable and meaningful. The danger of quantum manifestation theory isn't that it encourages positive thinking, but that it creates false expectations about the relationship between consciousness and physical reality. When people believe their thoughts should directly control external events, they may become frustrated, self-critical, or disillusioned when reality doesn't conform to their intentions. There's something particularly troubling about how quantum manifestation theories exploit scientific language and authority to gain credibility. This isn't accidental misunderstanding. It's systematic misappropriation of technical terminology to make unsupported claims sound sophisticated and authoritative. The strategy is subtle but effective. Take genuine scientific terms like quantum field, wave function, entanglement, and observer effect, then strip them of their precise technical meanings while retaining their aura of scientific legitimacy. The result is a vocabulary that sounds profound and educated, but lacks the rigor and precision that makes science reliable. Murray Gell-Mann, the Nobel Prize-winning physicist who discovered quarks, coined the phrase quantum flapdoodle to describe this misuse of quantum terminology. He was particularly critical of how New Age gurus and self-help teachers would invoke quantum mechanics to support claims that had nothing to do with actual physics. The film What the Bleep Do We Know provides a perfect example of how this misappropriation works. The movie presents itself as a documentary about quantum physics and consciousness, featuring interviews with people who appear to have scientific credentials. But many of the central claims about consciousness controlling reality have no basis in legitimate quantum research. As you consider this phenomenon, notice how the language of science gets weaponized to bypass critical thinking. When someone uses terms like quantum field or vibrational frequency in the context of manifestation, they're not making a scientific argument that can be tested and verified. They're using scientific-sounding language to make unscientific claims seem credible. This exploitation of scientific authority is particularly concerning because it undermines public understanding of how science actually works. Real science progresses through careful experimentation, peer review, and the gradual accumulation of evidence. It's a process of questioning, testing, and refining ideas based on empirical data. Quantum manifestation theory bypasses this entire process by borrowing scientific conclusions without adopting scientific methodology. It presents itself as science while avoiding the rigorous testing that actual scientific theories must undergo. The result is a kind of pseudoscientific thinking that can sound convincing but falls apart under careful scrutiny. The appeal of this approach is understandable. Scientific authority carries tremendous weight in modern culture, and for good reason. Science has given us unprecedented understanding of the natural world and technologies that have dramatically improved human life. When someone claims that quantum physics supports their spiritual or self-help teachings, they're borrowing from this well-earned credibility. But this borrowing comes at a cost. It not only misleads people about what quantum physics actually demonstrates, it also erodes trust in scientific institutions and expertise. When people discover that quantum manifestation claims aren't supported by real physics research, they may become skeptical of science more generally. The irony is that the genuine discoveries of quantum mechanics are far more awe-inspiring than any manifestation theory. The real quantum world reveals a universe of incredible mathematical elegance, where information and probability flow according to precise laws that govern everything from the behavior of individual atoms to the operation of neutron stars. Take a moment to breathe and consider what authentic scientific wonder looks like. When physicists study quantum entanglement, they're not just observing a curious phenomenon, they're uncovering fundamental principles about how information can be distributed across space and time. When they investigate wave-particle duality, they're exploring the deepest questions about the nature of matter and energy. These discoveries don't require embellishment or spiritual interpretation to be meaningful. They stand on their own as remarkable insights into the structure of reality. The mathematical frameworks that describe quantum behavior are among humanity's greatest intellectual achievements, revealing patterns and relationships that no human mind could have imagined without careful observation and rigorous analysis. The misuse of quantum terminology in manifestation culture also reveals something important about how we relate to scientific knowledge. Many people feel intimidated by the mathematical complexity of real physics and prefer simplified explanations that seem to connect scientific discoveries to their personal concerns and aspirations. This isn't a character flaw, it's a natural human response to complex information. We all use mental shortcuts and simplified models to navigate a world that's far too complicated to understand in complete detail. The problem arises when these simplifications become so divorced from their original context that they lose all connection to empirical reality. Educational research shows that people who develop better understanding of scientific methodology and maintain appropriate skepticism toward extraordinary claims are less susceptible to quantum pseudoscience. This suggests that the solution isn't just better physics education, but better science literacy more generally. As we continue our exploration, we'll discover how the genuine mysteries of consciousness and quantum mechanics might relate to each other without requiring belief in manifestation theory. We'll explore what neuroscience reveals about the nature of awareness and how this understanding might complement rather than contradict our knowledge of quantum physics. But first, let's examine one more crucial aspect of this story: how the placebo effect and confirmation bias create compelling personal experiences that seem to validate quantum manifestation claims, even when no quantum processes are actually involved. The journey ahead will take us deeper into the psychology of belief, the nature of consciousness itself, and the beautiful complexity of a universe that for thinking. Alongorable principles rather than wish operates according to disk of the way. We might find that reality, as it actually exists, offers possibilities for meaning and connection that don't require us to misunderstand physics to appreciate. In our next segment, we'll explore how the brain creates the subjective experience of consciousness and why this remarkable phenomenon doesn't require quantum mechanical explanations to be extraordinary. We'll discover that the real mystery of awareness might be even more fascinating than any quantum consciousness theory suggests. As we settle deeper into our contemplative journey, let's explore one of the most elegant aspects of human psychology: how our brains create meaning from randomness and weave stories from scattered events. This isn't a flaw in our thinking, it's actually one of our most remarkable cognitive abilities. But when it comes to understanding why people believe in quantum manifestation, this same gift for pattern recognition becomes the source of compelling illusions. Picture yourself walking through a forest, sunlight filtering through leaves in shifting patterns. Your brain doesn't just register random light and shadow. It searches for faces in tree bark, animals in cloud formations, paths where none exist. This pattern-seeking behavior kept our ancestors alive, helping them spot predators hiding in vegetation and find food sources others might miss. But in the modern world, this same neural architecture can lead us to see connections and causations that exist only in our imagination. When someone practices quantum manifestation techniques and then experiences positive outcomes, their brain naturally creates a story linking the practice to the result. The visualization session last Tuesday becomes connected to the job interview invitation on Thursday, which connects to the successful outcome the following week. The mind weaves these events into a coherent narrative where intention caused manifestation, even though correlation isn't causation. This storytelling ability is so fundamental to human consciousness that we often don't notice it happening. Take a moment to observe your own thought processes. Notice how your mind constantly explains creations for why things happen, even when you have incomplete information. This isn't deliberate deception, it's how awareness itself operates, constantly constructing meaning from the stream of sensory input and memory fragments flowing through consciousness. The psychological mechanisms behind perceived manifestation success are both more mundane and more fascinating than quantum theories suggest. When we set a clear intention or goal, several well-documented cognitive changes occur. Our attention becomes more selective, focusing on information relevant to our objective while filtering out irrelevant details. This heightened awareness makes us more likely to notice opportunities that were always present but previously overlooked. Psychologists call this phenomenon selective attention, and you can experience it directly. Think of a specific colour. Let's say yellow. Now, without moving from where you are, notice how many yellow objects you can spot in your environment. You're probably seeing yellow things that were there all along but didn't register in your conscious awareness until you directed your attention toward them. This same mechanism operates when people focus their intention on specific outcomes. The person visualizing a new relationship becomes more attuned to social opportunities. The individual manifesting financial abundance notices more business possibilities. The heightened awareness isn't mystical, it's neurological. Different areas of the brain responsible for attention and goal-directed behavior become more active, effectively upgrading the mind's pattern recognition systems. But there's another layer to this story that touches something deeper about human nature. The act of setting clear intentions and maintaining positive expectations can genuinely influence behavior in ways that improve outcomes. When you believe success is possible, you're more likely to take risks, persist through challenges, and maintain the kind of optimistic social presence that attracts opportunities and support from others. This isn't quantum mechanics at work, it's classical psychology. The placebo effect demonstrates how powerfully expectation can influence subjective experience. When people believe they're receiving an effective treatment, their brains often produce real physiological changes that can improve symptoms and overall well-being. The belief itself becomes a kind of medicine, not because consciousness manipulates quantum fields, but because the nervous system responds to expectation in measurable ways. As you reflect on this, consider your own experiences with positive thinking and goal achievement. Have you noticed that maintaining optimistic expectations tends to improve your motivation and persistence? This correlation doesn't require quantum explanations to be meaningful. The human brain is already remarkable enough in its capacity to transform belief into behavior and expectation into experience. The confirmation bias aspect of manifestation beliefs operates through a different but equally fascinating mechanism. Once we form a theory about how the world works, our brains become sophisticated, evidence-gathering systems that support that theory while minimizing contradictory information. This isn't conscious deception, it's how cognitive efficiency operates. The mind filters overwhelming amounts of information by prioritizing data that fits existing mental models. When someone believes in quantum manifestation, they naturally notice and remember instances where their intentions seemed to influence outcomes, while forgetting or explaining away the many times when focused visualization produced no discernible results. This selective memory creates a compelling personal database of apparent successes that reinforces the original belief, even when objective analysis would reveal far more failures than successes. But here's what's truly beautiful about these psychological mechanisms. They reveal something profound about the relationship between consciousness and reality, just not in the way manifestation theory suggests. The human mind doesn't directly manipulate quantum fields, but it does something equally remarkable. It constructs subjective reality from the raw materials of sensory input, memory, and expectation, creating the coherent narrative of selfhood that we experience as consciousness itself. This constructive nature of awareness has been recognized by contemplative traditions for millennia, long before quantum physics existed. Buddhist philosophy speaks of the mind's tendency to create elaborate stories from simple experiences. Hindu traditions describe Maya, the illusory nature of perceived reality. These insights weren't based on misunderstandings of physics. They emerged from careful observation of how consciousness actually operates. The irony is that these ancient wisdom traditions often provide more accurate descriptions of the mind's reality-constructing tendencies than modern quantum manifestation theories. They recognize that while consciousness powerfully shapes subjective experience, it does so through psychological and spiritual processes rather than by manipulating the fundamental laws of physics. Let's venture into deeper territory now, exploring something that sits at the intersection of human longing and scientific discovery. There's a reason why quantum entanglement became such a powerful metaphor for manifestation culture. And understanding this reason reveals something important about how we process both hope and knowledge in an uncertain world. The genuine phenomenon of quantum entanglement does suggest something profound about the nature of reality. When two particles become entangled, they remain mysteriously correlated regardless of the distance separating them. This connection ends our transordinary understanding of space and locality, hinting at levels of interconnection that classical physics couldn't explain. It's no wonder that people searching for meaning and connection found this scientific discovery deeply resonant. But as you've been learning throughout our journey, the leap from particle entanglement to human consciousness connection represents a fundamental misunderstanding of both quantum mechanics and neuroscience. The conditions required for quantum entanglement simply don't exist in biological systems, particularly not in the warm, noisy, electrically active environment of human brains. Yet there's something worth preserving in the intuition that draws people to entanglement metaphors. Humans are indeed profoundly interconnected, just not through quantum mechanical processes. We're connected through language, culture, shared experiences, and the countless ways our actions ripple outward through social and environmental systems. These connections are real, measurable, and far more complex than simple particle correlations. Consider for a moment how your current thoughts and emotions are influenced by conversations you've had, books you've read, music you've heard, and experiences you've shared with others. These influences travel through entirely classical channels, neural networks and social networks, cultural transmission and emotional contagion, but they create genuine interconnection that spans both space and time. When you smile at a stranger and brighten their day, when you share an idea that influences someone's thinking, when you make a choice that affects your family's future, you're participating in a web of connection that extends far beyond your individual consciousness. This network operates through physics, biology, psychology, and sociology, creating genuine influence and interdependence that doesn't require quantum explanations to be meaningful. The misappropriation of entanglement language in spiritual and self-help contexts reveals something important about how scientific metaphors migrate into popular culture. Complex phenomena get simplified into appealing images that capture emotional truths even when they lose scientific accuracy. The poetry of quantum connection resonates because it points toward genuine human experiences of interconnection and influence, even though the scientific mechanism is entirely different from what the metaphor suggests. This pattern repeats throughout the history of how scientific discoveries get integrated into broader cultural narratives. Darwin's insights about evolution became metaphors for social and economic competition. Einstein's relativity inspired philosophical speculation about the subjective nature of reality. Quantum mechanics spawned an entire industry of consciousness theories that bear little resemblance to the actual physics involved. The problem isn't that people find inspiration in scientific discoveries, it's when metaphorical thinking gets mistaken for literal truth. The beauty of quantum entanglement as a symbol of connection doesn't require belief that human consciousness actually creates entangled quantum states. The power of evolutionary metaphors doesn't depend on social Darwinism being scientifically valid. As you contemplate this distinction, notice how it might apply to your own relationship with scientific ideas. Can you appreciate the poetic resonance of quantum interconnection while recognizing that genuine human connection operates through different mechanisms? This kind of nuanced thinking allows us to draw inspiration from scientific discoveries without falling into the trap of pseudoscientific literalism. The fascination with quantum consciousness theories also reveals something deeper about how we relate to mystery and uncertainty. The quantum world genuinely is mysterious in ways that challenge our intuitive understanding of reality. Particles do exist in superposition states. Measurement does affect quantum systems, and entangled particles do exhibit correlations that seem to transcend space and time. But the response to these mysteries in manifestation culture often involves premature closure, rushing to fill the gaps in our understanding with explanations that make us feel more comfortable and empowered. The genuine mystery of quantum mechanics gets transformed into false certainty about consciousness controlling reality, replacing authentic wonder with wishful thinking. True scientific thinking maintains comfort with uncertainty and mystery. It acknowledges the limits of current knowledge while remaining open to genuine discoveries. This kind of intellectual humility allows for authentic awe at the genuine mysteries of quantum mechanics without needing to transform them into vehicles for personal empowerment or spiritual validation. The real quantum world offers something far more valuable than the false promises of manifestation theory. It reveals a universe where information and probability flow according to elegant mathematical principles that no human mind could have invented. It demonstrates that reality, at its most fundamental level, operates according to rules that are simultaneously precise and probabilistic, deterministic and uncertain. This authentic quantum mystery doesn't diminish human agency or meaning. Instead, it locates human consciousness within a cosmos of incredible complexity and beauty, where the emergence of awareness itself represents one of the most remarkable phenomena in the known universe. We don't need to control quantum fields to be significant. We are already expressions of the universe's capacity for complexity, creativity, and self-awareness. Now let's explore what actually happens in the brain when people have powerful manifestation experiences. The moments that feel so convincing that they seem to prove quantum consciousness theories correct. Understanding the neuroscience behind these experiences doesn't diminish their subjective reality or emotional significance, but it does reveal how consciousness creates compelling illusions without requiring any quantum mechanical explanations. When someone engages in visualization practices, focused intention, or other manifestation techniques, several measurable changes occur in brain activity. Neuroimaging studies show increased activation in areas associated with attention, goal-directed behavior, and emotional regulation. The prefrontal cortex, responsible for executive function and planning, becomes more active. The default mode network, associated with mind-wandering and self-referential thinking, often shows decreased activity, creating the focused, present-moment awareness that many people find deeply meaningful. These neural changes are real and can produce genuine improvements in mood, motivation, and behavior. When you clearly visualize a desired outcome while maintaining positive emotional states, you're essentially training your brain to recognize patterns and opportunities related to that goal. This isn't mystical, it's applied neuroscience, using the brain's natural plasticity to optimize cognitive and emotional functioning. But there's another fascinating aspect of how the brain creates manifestation experiences: the role of what neuroscientists call predictive processing. Your brain doesn't passively receive information from the external world. Instead, it constantly generates predictions about what should happen next, based on past experience and current context. These predictions influence not just what you notice, but literally what you perceive and remember. Take a moment to consider how this might work in your own experience. When you're in a positive, optimistic state of mind, your brain tends to generate predictions that favor successful outcomes. This optimistic prediction doesn't change external reality, but it does change how you interpret ambiguous situations, what opportunities you notice, and how you remember events after they occur. The phenomenon becomes even more interesting when we consider the role of emotional memory in creating compelling personal narratives. Events that occur when we're in heightened emotional states, whether positive or negative, get encoded more strongly in memory systems. This means that the successes that follow manifestation practices are more likely to be vividly remembered than the failures or neutral outcomes. Your brain also has remarkable capacity for what psychologists call hindsight bias, the tendency to perceive past events as more predictable than they actually were. When something you visualized actually occurs, your memory systems unconsciously edit the story to emphasize the connection between intention and outcome, while minimizing the role of chance, timing, or other factors that might have contributed to the results. These memory biases aren't character flaws or intellectual failures. They're features of how consciousness constructs coherent narratives from the chaotic stream of daily experience. The brain prioritizes meaning-making over accuracy, creating stories that support psychological well-being and motivation, even when those stories don't perfectly reflect objective reality. But perhaps the most fascinating aspect of manifestation experiences involves what neuroscientists call the brain's reward prediction systems. When you set a clear intention and maintain positive expectations, your dopamine pathways become primed to recognize and celebrate outcomes that match your goals. This heightened sensitivity to reward makes successful manifestations feel more significant and satisfying than they might otherwise seem. The subjective intensity of these experiences can be so compelling that they override analytical thinking. When someone has a profound sense of having manifested a desired outcome, the emotional conviction often feels more trustworthy than abstract scientific reasoning about correlation versus causation. This isn't intellectual weakness, it's how the human brain prioritizes different types of information when constructing beliefs about reality. Understanding these neurological mechanisms doesn't invalidate the positive effects that manifestation practices can have on people's lives. The improved mood, increased motivation, enhanced focus, and greater optimism that often result from these techniques are genuine benefits that can improve quality of life and effectiveness in pursuing goals. The practices work just not through the quantum mechanical processes that manifestation theory claims. As you reflect on this neurological perspective, consider how it might change your relationship with intention setting and visualization practices. These techniques can be valuable tools for optimizing brain function and improving outcomes, but they don't require belief in quantum consciousness to be effective. Understanding the actual mechanisms might even make them more powerful by allowing you to use them more skillfully and realistically. The brain's capacity to create compelling subjective experiences from entirely classical neurological processes is actually more amazing than any quantum consciousness theory. The fact that patterns of electrical activity in neural networks can generate the rich multi-dimensional experience of consciousness itself represents one of the deepest mysteries in science, far more profound than the false mystery of thoughts controlling quantum fields. This authentic mystery of consciousness doesn't require quantum mechanical explanations to be awe-inspiring. The emergence of subjective experience from objective neural activity represents a phenomenon that science is only beginning to understand, involving complex interactions between billions of neurons, sophisticated information processing systems, and feedback loops that create the unified sense of selfhood we take for granted. The real relationship between consciousness and physical reality is far more subtle and interesting than simple manifestation theories suggest. Your brain constructs your subjective reality through incredibly sophisticated processes that integrate sensory input, memory, expectation, and emotion into the coherent narrative of experience. This construction is so seamless that we rarely notice it happening, but it represents one of the most remarkable achievements of biological evolution. As our exploration draws toward its close, let's step back and consider what we've discovered about the relationship between authentic scientific wonder and the human search for meaning and connection. The story we've been telling isn't really about debunking manifestation theory. It's about finding genuine awe in what the universe actually offers us, rather than what we might wish it could provide. The real quantum world reveals a cosmos far stranger and more beautiful than any human imagination could devise. At the smallest scales of reality, particles exist in superposition, states that defy common sense. Information travels through quantum channels that connect distant regions of space, and the very act of measurement reveals the fundamental limits of what can be simultaneously known about physical systems. These discoveries emerge through centuries of careful observation, mathematical analysis, and experimental verification. They represent humanity's greatest intellectual achievements, revealing patterns and relationships that no individual mind could have conceived without the collaborative process of scientific investigation. The equations of quantum mechanics describe reality with precision that exceeds any previous human knowledge, making predictions accurate to more than 10 decimal places. This extraordinary precision stands in stark contrast to the vague, intention-based claims of quantum manifestation theory. Real quantum mechanics doesn't promise that consciousness can control physical outcomes through focused thinking. Instead, it reveals a universe that operates according to discoverable principles that exist independent of human desires or beliefs. But rather than diminishing human significance, this scientific understanding locates consciousness within a cosmos of incredible complexity and beauty. The emergence of awareness itself, the capacity for subjective experience and self-reflection, represents one of the most remarkable phenomena in the known universe. We are not separate from this quantum reality. We are expressions of its capacity for organization, complexity, and self-awareness. As you contemplate this perspective, notice how it might change your relationship with both science and spirituality. Authentic wonder doesn't require misunderstanding physics to be meaningful. The genuine mysteries of consciousness, quantum mechanics, and cosmic evolution offer more than enough material for lifelong fascination without needing to invent false connections between them. The human search for meaning, control, and connection that drives interest in manifestation theories points toward genuine needs that deserve thoughtful responses. We do need practices that help us navigate uncertainty, maintain hope, and feel connected to something larger than our individual concerns. But these needs can be met through approaches grounded in psychological understanding and contemplative wisdom, rather than pseudoscientific claims about consciousness controlling quantum fields. Meditation, for example, offers genuine benefits for mental clarity, emotional regulation, and stress reduction. These benefits don't depend on beliefs about quantum consciousness. They emerge from well-documented changes in brain function that occur with regular contemplative practice. The peace and insight that arise from meditation are valuable in their own right, without needing validation from misappropriated physics concepts. Similarly, the practices of setting clear intentions, maintaining positive expectations, and visualizing desired outcomes can genuinely improve motivation, focus, and behavior. These techniques work through classical psychological mechanisms involving attention, memory, and goal-directed behavior. Understanding the actual mechanisms might even make these practices more effective by allowing people to use them more skillfully and realistically. The interconnection and influence that people seek through quantum consciousness theories already exist through entirely classical channels. We are connected to each other and to the larger world through language, culture, shared experiences, and the countless ways our actions ripple outward through social and environmental systems. These connections are real, measurable, and far more complex than simple particle entanglement could provide. The universe revealed by modern science offers possibilities for meaning and wonder that don't require us to misunderstand physics to appreciate. We live in a cosmos where simple mathematical laws give rise to incredible complexity, where matter organizes itself into structures capable of contemplating their own existence, where consciousness emerges from the intricate dance of neural networks, processing information in ways we're only beginning to understand. This authentic scientific picture of reality provides a foundation for genuine awe that doesn't depend on wishful thinking or pseudoscientific claims. It reveals a universe that is simultaneously lawful and creative, deterministic and emergent, comprehensible and mysterious. Within this cosmos, human consciousness represents not a controller of quantum fields, but an expression of the universe's capacity for complexity, beauty, and self-reflection. As we prepare to conclude our contemplative journey together, take a moment to breathe deeply and consider what authentic wonder might look like in your own life. How might your relationship with uncertainty, hope, and connection change if it were grounded in scientific understanding rather than manifestation mythology? What possibilities might emerge when we embrace the genuine mysteries of consciousness and cosmos without needing to control them through impossible quantum mechanisms? The journey ahead involves learning to find meaning and agency within the actual constraints and possibilities that reality offers, rather than the imaginary freedoms promised by pseudoscientific theories. This may require letting go of some comforting illusions, but it opens the door to more authentic and sustainable approaches to personal growth and spiritual development. In our final segment, we'll explore what this scientific understanding might mean for how we approach questions of consciousness, meaning, and our place in the cosmos. We'll discover that reality, as it actually exists, offers possibilities for connection and significance that are far more profound than any quantum manifestation theory could provide. But before we conclude, if you found this exploration thought-provoking and meaningful, I'd be deeply grateful if you shared your reflections in the comments below. Where do you find yourself in this conversation between scientific precision and human hope? And if this kind of contemplative science resonates with you, you might find our previous exploration equally fascinating. We asked the universe the big questions and got terrifying answers, where we delved into some of the most profound questions physics has revealed about the nature of existence itself. The universe is vast, mysterious, and more wonderful than we could ever imagine. The question isn't whether we can control it through quantum consciousness, but whether we can learn to appreciate the incredible gift of being aware, thinking beings within dance of this cosmic matter, energy, and information that somehow gave rise to the very consciousness through which we contemplate these mysteries. What emerges when we step away from the seductive promises of quantum manifestation and examine consciousness through the lens of rigorous science? Something far more extraordinary than any theory about thoughts controlling reality. We discover that the human brain, operating entirely through classical physics and chemistry, creates experiences so rich and complex that they rival any mystical phenomenon ever imagined. The neuroscience of consciousness reveals a process that is simultaneously mechanical and magical. Billions of neurons, each one a sophisticated electrochemical processor, work together to create the unified experience of being you. This isn't quantum mechanics work, it's emergent complexity. The way simple components following basic rules can give rise to behaviors and properties that seem to transcend their individual limitations. Take a moment to consider what's happening in your brain as you process these words. Photons from your screen strike specialized cells in your retina, triggering cascades of electrical signals that travel through your optic nerve to visual processing centers in your cortex. Simultaneously, other neural networks are retrieving memories, generating emotional responses, and constructing meaning from the patterns of information flowing through your nervous system. This remarkable process creates not just understanding, but the subjective experience of understanding, the felt sense of insight and recognition that accompanies learning. No quantum field manipulation required, no consciousness collapsing wave functions to create meaning. Just the extraordinary dance of neural networks processing information in ways that give rise to the phenomenon of awareness itself. The implications of this scientific understanding extend far beyond debunking manifestation theories. When we recognize that consciousness operates through entirely natural processes, we open the door to more effective approaches for personal growth, emotional regulation, and mental well-being. Instead of trying to control external reality through impossible quantum mechanisms, we can focus on optimizing the actual systems that create our subjective experience. Mindfulness meditation, for example, produces measurable changes in brain structure and function that improve attention, emotional regulation, and stress resilience. These benefits don't require belief in quantum consciousness. They emerge from the brain's natural capacity for neuroplasticity, the ability to reorganize neural networks based on repeated patterns of activity. When you practice focused attention during meditation, you're literally strengthening neural pathways associated with concentration, while weakening networks related to mind-wandering and rumination. This isn't metaphysical transformation, it's applied neuroscience, using the brain's inherent adaptability to optimize cognitive and emotional functioning. The same principles apply to other contemplative practices that people often associate with quantum consciousness theories. Visualization exercises can improve performance and motivation by activating neural networks involved in goal-directed behavior and motor planning. Gratitude practices can shift activity in brain circuits associated with positive emotion and social connection. These techniques work through well-understood neurological mechanisms that don't require quantum explanations to be effective. As you reflect on this neurological perspective, notice how it might actually enhance rather than diminish your appreciation for consciousness-based practices. Understanding that meditation changes your brain in measurable ways doesn't make the experience less meaningful. It reveals the incredible sophistication of the biological systems that support awareness and well-being. This scientific understanding also provides a more realistic foundation for expectations about what contemplative practices can and cannot accomplish. While meditation won't allow you to manifest external outcomes through quantum field manipulation, it can genuinely improve your ability to navigate challenges, regulate emotions, and maintain clarity under pressure. These benefits, grounded in neuroscience rather than pseudophysics, are actually more reliable and sustainable than any promised quantum effects. Here's something that might surprise you about the relationship between science and spirituality. The more we understand about how consciousness actually works, the more awe-inspiring it becomes. The genuine mystery of awareness doesn't require quantum mechanical explanations to be profound. In fact, the emergence of subjective experience from objective neural processes represents a phenomenon that science is only beginning to understand. Consider what happens when you experience beauty, perhaps while watching a sunset or listening to music that moves you deeply. From a neuroscientific perspective, specific patterns of neural activity are creating that aesthetic experience. Regions of your brain associated with sensory processing, emotional response, and memory integration are working together to generate the subjective feeling of being moved by beauty. But here's the remarkable thing. Even though we can map these neural correlates of aesthetic experience, we still don't fully understand how patterns of electrical activity give rise to the rich, qualitative experience of beauty itself. This is what philosophers call the hard problem of consciousness, the question of how objective neural processes create subjective experience. This authentic mystery doesn't require us to misunderstand quantum mechanics to be meaningful. The emergence of consciousness from neural activity represents one of the deepest puzzles in all of science, involving questions about the nature of information, the relationship between mind and matter, and the fundamental structure of reality itself. Take a breath and consider how this perspective might change your relationship with mystery and wonder. Rather than filling gaps in our understanding with premature quantum explanations, we can maintain intellectual humility while remaining open to genuine discoveries about the nature of consciousness and its place in the cosmic order. The scientific study of consciousness reveals phenomena that are genuinely extraordinary. The brain's capacity for self-reflection doesn't require supernatural explanations. The brain, to model not just the external world but its own internal states, represents a level of recursive complexity that seems almost miraculous when you really contemplate it. You are currently engaged in this remarkable process as you think about thinking itself. Your brain is using neural networks to contemplate the very neural networks that make contemplation possible. This kind of recursive self-awareness, emerging from entirely natural processes, demonstrates a level of sophistication that rivals any mystical phenomenon ever proposed. The implications extend beyond individual consciousness to questions about meaning and purpose in a scientific worldview. If consciousness emerges naturally from complex information processing systems, then awareness itself becomes a fundamental feature of how the universe organizes matter and energy into increasingly sophisticated forms. This perspective suggests that consciousness isn't separate from the natural world, but represents one of its most remarkable achievements. We are not outside observers trying to control quantum fields. We are expressions of the universe's capacity for complexity, creativity, and self-reflection. This scientific understanding provides a foundation for genuine spiritual awe that doesn't depend on misunderstanding physics. The contemplative traditions that have explored consciousness for millennia often arrived at similar insights through direct observation of mental phenomena. Buddhist psychology describes awareness as naturally luminous and spacious, capable of reflecting any content without being fundamentally changed by it. This description aligns remarkably well with neuroscientific findings about the brain's capacity to process diverse information while maintaining coherent patterns of activity. The Hindu concept of consciousness as the fundamental ground of being, while traditionally interpreted in metaphysical terms, might be understood scientifically as recognition that information processing and subjective experience represent fundamental features of how complex systems organize themselves. These interpretations remain speculative rather than proven scientific fact, but they suggest possible bridges between contemplative wisdom and scientific understanding. So where does this leave us in terms of practical approaches to personal growth, emotional well-being, and the human search for meaning? If consciousness can't control quantum fields to manifest desired outcomes, what can it actually accomplish? The answer, grounded in neuroscience and psychology rather than pseudophysics, is both more modest and more reliable than quantum manifestation promises. The practices that people often associate with quantum consciousness, meditation, visualization, intention setting, gratitude cultivation, can genuinely improve quality of life and effectiveness in pursuing goals. But they work through classical psychological and neurological mechanisms that don't require belief in impossible quantum effects to be effective. When you engage in focused visualization of a desired outcome, you're training attention networks in your brain to maintain sustained focus on goal-relevant information. This enhanced attention makes you more likely to notice opportunities and resources that support your objectives. The visualization doesn't quantum mechanically create the opportunities, but it does optimize your cognitive systems for recognizing and acting on possibilities that were already present in your environment. Similarly, practices that cultivate positive emotional states can genuinely improve motivation, creativity, and social effectiveness. When you maintain optimistic expectations while taking practical action toward your goals, you're more likely to persist through challenges, take appropriate risks, and inspire confidence in others who might support your efforts. These psychological effects are real and measurable, but they operate through entirely natural processes involving attention, memory, emotion, and social interaction. Understanding the actual mechanisms makes these practices more reliable because you can use them more skillfully, with realistic expectations about what they can and cannot accomplish. As you consider incorporating contemplative practices into your own life, notice how scientific understanding might actually enhance, rather than undermine, their effectiveness. Knowing that meditation produces measurable changes in brain structure doesn't make the practice less meaningful. It provides confidence that consistent effort will yield genuine results. The key is maintaining what we might call contemplative realism, approaches to personal development that honor both the genuine power of consciousness-based practices and the actual mechanisms through which they operate. This perspective allows you to benefit from meditation, visualization, and intention setting without falling into the trap of magical thinking about consciousness controlling external reality. Contemplative realism also provides protection against the disappointment and self-blame that can result from unrealistic expectations about manifestation. When you understand that your thoughts influence your behavior and attention, rather than directly controlling quantum fields, you can maintain motivation and self-compassion even when external circumstances don't immediately align with your intentions. The practices themselves become more sustainable when grounded in scientific understanding because you're working with natural psychological processes rather than against the fundamental laws of physics. You can develop meditation skills, enhance emotional regulation, and optimize cognitive function without needing to believe in impossible quantum effects. This approach also opens the door to integrating contemplative practices with other evidence-based approaches to personal development. Meditation can complement psychotherapy, visualization can enhance skill training, and gratitude practices can support social connection and emotional resilience. The synergistic effects of combining multiple approaches, each grounded in scientific understanding, often produce more comprehensive and lasting benefits than any single technique used in isolation. Let's step back now and consider what this scientific understanding of consciousness means for our relationship with the larger cosmos. If we can't control quantum fields through focused intention, how do we find meaning and significance within the vast, law-governed universe revealed by modern science? The answer lies in recognizing that consciousness itself represents one of the most remarkable phenomena in the known universe. The emergence of awareness from complex information processing systems demonstrates that the cosmos possesses an inherent capacity for self-reflection and experience. We are not separate from this cosmic process. We are expressions of its creative potential. Consider the extraordinary journey that led to your current moment of awareness. The atoms that compose your body were forged in the nuclear furnaces of ancient stars, scattered through space by stellar explosions, and eventually assembled through billions of years of chemical and biological evolution into the complex neural networks that generate consciousness. This scientific origin story is more awe-inspiring than any mystical narrative about quantum consciousness controlling reality. You are literally made of stardust that has organized itself into patterns capable of contemplating the very stars from which it came. The carbon in your neurons, the oxygen in your blood, the calcium in your bones, all of these elements were created in stellar cores and delivered to Earth through cosmic processes spanning billions of years. The universe didn't need to develop consciousness for any obvious reason related to physical survival. Simple self-replicating systems could have continued evolving without ever giving rise to subjective experience. Yet somehow, through processes we don't fully understand, matter organized itself into forms capable of wonder, beauty, love, and the search for meaning itself. This emergence of consciousness represents what we might call the universe becoming aware of itself through our eyes, thoughts, and experiences. Every moment of awareness, every instance of appreciation for beauty or truth or connection represents the cosmos reflecting on its own nature through the biological systems it has created. As you contemplate this cosmic perspective, notice how it locates human consciousness within the grand narrative of cosmic evolution without requiring supernatural explanations. We are significant not because we can control quantum fields through intention, but because we represent the universe's capacity for complexity, creativity, and self-awareness. This scientific understanding provides a foundation for genuine spiritual awe that doesn't depend on misunderstanding physics. The fact that unconscious matter can give rise to conscious experience, that simple physical laws can generate the incredible diversity and beauty of life, that information processing systems can develop the capacity for love and wonder. These phenomena are genuinely miraculous, without requiring miracles in the supernatural sense. The contemplative implications of this cosmic perspective are profound. If consciousness represents the universe's capacity for self-reflection, then practices that cultivate awareness, clarity, and compassion become ways of participating in cosmic evolution itself. Meditation doesn't manipulate quantum fields, but it does refine the very systems through which the universe becomes conscious of itself. This perspective suggests that the cultivation of consciousness, the development of wisdom and compassion, the creation of beauty and meaning, represent genuine contributions to cosmic evolution. not through impossible quantum effects, but through the entirely natural process of complex systems becoming more aware, more integrated, and more capable of generating positive experiences. The search for meaning that drives interest in quantum manifestation theories finds more authentic satisfaction in this scientific understanding of consciousness as cosmic self-reflection. We don't need to control external reality through impossible mechanisms to be significant. We are already expressions of the universe's most remarkable achievement, the emergence of awareness itself. As our contemplative journey approaches its conclusion, let's explore one final aspect of this conversation between science and consciousness: the wisdom that emerges from accepting uncertainty rather than trying to control it through impossible quantum mechanisms. The genuine quantum world operates according to principles that include fundamental uncertainty and randomness. But this uncertainty isn't controllable by human consciousness. The Heisenberg uncertainty principle describes precise mathematical limits on what can be simultaneously known about quantum systems, but it doesn't suggest that consciousness can influence these limits through focused intention. This authentic quantum uncertainty reveals something profound about the nature of reality itself. The universe operates according to laws that are simultaneously precise and probabilistic, predictable in statistical terms, but fundamentally uncertain at the level of individual events. This isn't a flaw in our knowledge, it's a feature of how information and probability flow through physical systems. Learning to find peace with this kind of irreducible uncertainty represents one of the most mature responses to the human condition. Rather than trying to control outcomes through impossible quantum consciousness effects, we can develop the capacity to act skillfully within uncertain circumstances while accepting that many factors influencing our lives remain beyond our direct control. This acceptance of uncertainty doesn't lead to passive resignation, but to what we might call wise action, making thoughtful choices based on available information while remaining flexible and responsive to changing circumstances. This approach, grounded in psychological wisdom rather than quantum pseudoscience, provides a more reliable foundation for navigating life's challenges. The contemplative traditions have long recognized uncertainty as a fundamental feature of existence that can be worked with skillfully rather than controlled or eliminated. Buddhist teachings about impermanence, Taoist concepts of wu-wei or effortless action, and Stoic practices of focusing on what is within our control all point toward ways of finding peace and effectiveness within uncertain conditions. As you reflect on your own relationship with uncertainty, notice how quantum manifestation theories might actually increase rather than decrease anxiety about control. When you believe that your thoughts should directly influence external outcomes, every failure to manifest desired results becomes a source of self-doubt and frustration. In contrast, scientific understanding of consciousness and its actual capabilities provides more realistic expectations that can reduce this kind of self-imposed pressure. When you understand that your thoughts influence your behavior and attention rather than directly controlling quantum fields, you can focus your efforts on what is actually within your influence while accepting what is not. This shift in perspective often leads to greater effectiveness in pursuing goals because energy isn't wasted on impossible attempts to control external circumstances through quantum consciousness effects. Instead, attention can focus on developing skills, building relationships, creating opportunities, and responding adaptively to changing conditions. The uncertainty that characterizes both quantum mechanics and human existence can become a source of wonder rather than anxiety when approached with appropriate understanding. The fact that individual quantum events are fundamentally unpredictable means that the universe retains an element of genuine creativity and novelty. Reality isn't a predetermined script, but an ongoing improvisation where new possibilities continuously emerge. Similarly, the uncertainty that characterizes human life means that your story isn't already written. While you can't control outcomes through quantum consciousness effects, you can influence the probability of different outcomes through your choices, actions, and responses to circumstances. This influence, operating through entirely classical mechanisms, provides genuine agency without requiring supernatural powers. The wisdom of uncertainty involves learning to dance with probability rather than trying to control it, developing skills and cultivating attitudes that improve your capacity to navigate unpredictable circumstances while finding meaning and satisfaction in the process itself rather than in predetermined outcomes. This approach to uncertainty, grounded in scientific understanding rather than quantum mysticism, provides a more stable well-being because foundation for emotional, it doesn't depend on impossible abilities to manifest desired outcomes through consciousness alone. Instead, it locates meaning in the development of wisdom, compassion, and skillful action within the actual constraints and possibilities that reality offers. And so we arrive at the end of our gentle exploration, having journeyed through the landscape of quantum physics, human consciousness, and the beautiful complexity of a universe that operates according to discoverable principles rather than wishful thinking. What have we learned about the relationship between mind and matter, between human longing and cosmic reality? The most important insight might be this: reality, as it actually exists, offers possibilities for meaning and connection that are far more profound than any quantum manifestation theory could provide. The genuine mysteries of consciousness, the authentic strangeness of quantum mechanics, the extraordinary story of cosmic evolution that gave rise to awareness itself. These phenomena are remarkable enough without needing embellishment through pseudoscientific claims. The human brain, operating entirely through classical physics and chemistry, creates experiences so rich and complex that they rival any mystical phenomenon ever imagined. The emergence of subjective awareness from objective neural processes represents one of the deepest mysteries in science, worthy of lifelong contemplation without requiring quantum mechanical explanations to be meaningful. The practices that people associate with quantum consciousness, meditation, visualization, intention setting, gratitude cultivation, can genuinely improve quality of life and effectiveness in pursuing goals. But they work through well-understood psychological and neurological mechanisms that are actually more reliable than any promised quantum effects, because they operate within the natural constraints of how consciousness actually functions. As you consider integrating these insights into your own life, take a moment to breathe deeply and notice what authentic wonder feels like when it's grounded in scientific understanding rather than pseudoscientific speculation. How might your relationship with uncertainty, hope, and personal growth change when it's based on what consciousness can actually accomplish, rather than what quantum theories falsely promise it might do? The universe revealed by modern science is simultaneously vast and intimate, lawful and creative, comprehensible and mysterious. Within this cosmos, human consciousness represents not a controller of quantum fields, but an expression of the universe's capacity for complexity, beauty, and self-reflection. This understanding provides a foundation for genuine spiritual awe that doesn't depend on misunderstanding physics to be transformative. The interconnection and influence that people seek through quantum consciousness theories already exist through entirely classical channels. We are connected to each other and to the larger world through language, culture, shared experiences, and the countless ways our actions ripple outward through social and environmental systems. These connections are real, measurable, and far more complex than simple particle entanglement could provide. The search for meaning that drives interest in manifestation culture finds more authentic satisfaction in this scientific understanding of consciousness as cosmic self-reflection. We don't need to control external reality through impossible quantum mechanisms to be significant. We are already expressions of the universe's most remarkable achievement, the emergence of awareness itself. Perhaps the deepest wisdom that emerges from this exploration is the recognition that we don't need to transcend the natural world to find meaning and purpose within it. The scientific understanding of consciousness, far from diminishing human significance, reveals awareness as one of the most extraordinary phenomena in the known universe. Every moment of consciousness of beauty, every experience or truth or connection represents the cosmos becoming aware of itself through the biological systems it has created. This isn't metaphor, it's the logical implication of understanding consciousness as an emergent property of complex information processing systems that arose through entirely natural evolutionary processes. The contemplative implications are profound. If consciousness represents the universe's capacity for self-reflection, then practices that cultivate awareness, clarity, and compassion become ways of participating in cosmic evolution itself. Not through impossible quantum effects, but through the entirely natural process of complex systems becoming more integrated, more aware, and more capable of generating wisdom and well-being. The quantum reality glitch that prevents manifestation isn't a limitation of human potential, it's a recognition of how different scales of reality operate according to different principles. And within the actual constraints and possibilities that consciousness offers, we find opportunities for growth, meaning, and connection that are far more reliable and satisfying than any quantum promises could provide. As we conclude this contemplative journey together, I want to thank you for your attention, your openness, and your willingness to explore these ideas with curiosity rather than defensiveness. Whether you came to this conversation as a believer in quantum manifestation or as a skeptic of such claims, I hope you found something valuable in our gentle investigation of what consciousness can and cannot actually accomplish. The universe is vast, mysterious, and more wonderful than we could ever imagine. The question isn't whether we can control it through quantum consciousness, but whether we can learn to appreciate the incredible gift of being aware, thinking beings within this cosmic dance of matter, energy, and information that somehow gave rise to the very consciousness through which we contemplate these mysteries. If this exploration has resonated with you, I'd be deeply grateful if you shared your thoughts in the comments below. How has this scientific perspective on consciousness changed your understanding of human potential and cosmic significance? And if you're drawn to these kinds of deep questions about existence itself, you might find our previous journey equally fascinating. In our exploration titled "We Asked the Universe the Big Questions and Got Terrifying Answers," we ventured into some of the most profound and unsettling questions that physics has revealed about the nature of reality. time, and our place in the cosmic order. It's a journey that complements tonight's discussion perfectly, examining not just what consciousness can do, but what the universe itself might be capable of in ways that challenge our most fundamental assumptions about existence. Until we meet again in this quiet corner of contemplative science, may your awareness be clear, your wonder be grounded in truth, and your journey through uncertainty be filled with wisdom and peace. The cosmos is calling, not through quantum fields that bend to our will, but through the extraordinary fact that matter has organized itself into forms capable of love, beauty, and the endless search for understanding. Good night, and thank you for sharing this gentle exploration of mind, matter, and the beautiful mystery of being conscious in a quantum universe. What emerges when we examine the laboratory of consciousness itself, not as a quantum field manipulator, but as the most sophisticated information processing system we've yet discovered. Something remarkable happens when we shift our focus from impossible control over external reality to the actual capabilities of awareness operating within the natural constraints of neurobiology and physics. The research facilities studying consciousness today reveal patterns that would have seemed like science fiction just decades ago. When neuroscientists place experienced meditators inside functional MRI machines, they observe coordinated activity across brain networks that suggests something profound about the nature of awareness itself. These aren't quantum effects, but they represent something equally fascinating: the capacity of complex systems to reorganize themselves through sustained attention and practice. Consider what happens during a single moment of focused awareness. Your prefrontal cortex, the brain's executive center, coordinates with attention networks to filter incoming sensory information. Meanwhile, default mode activity, the mental chatter that typically runs in the background, becomes quieter and more organized. This isn't consciousness controlling quantum fields. It's consciousness optimizing its own operational parameters through entirely classical neurological processes. The implications extend far beyond individual meditation practice. When groups of people engage in sustained contemplative work together, interesting patterns emerge in their collective behavior and decision-making. While some interpretations suggest this might reflect quantum entanglement between minds, the scientific consensus indicates these effects operate through well-understood mechanisms of social psychology, emotional contagion, and shared intention, coordinating behavior through entirely classical channels. As you contemplate this perspective, notice how it might change your understanding of what contemplative practices actually accomplish. The benefits don't require quantum mechanical validation to be profound. The capacity to systematically train attention, regulate emotion, and cultivate states of clarity and compassion represents one of humanity's most remarkable discoveries about the plasticity of consciousness itself. Recent neuroscience research reveals that sustained meditation practice can literally reshape brain structure, increasing cortical thickness in areas associated with attention and sensory processing, while reducing activity in regions linked to mind-wandering and self-referential thinking. This neuroplasticity occurs through entirely natural processes involving gene expression, protein synthesis, and the formation of new neural connections. But here's where the story becomes even more intriguing. Some studies suggest that when large numbers of people in a community engage in meditation practice simultaneously, various social indicators seem to shift in positive directions. Crime rates may decrease, accident rates might drop, and measures of social cohesion sometimes improve. These correlations remain controversial and unconfirmed by scientific consensus, but they point toward possibilities that don't require quantum consciousness to be meaningful. The mechanisms behind such effects, if they exist, likely involve the ripple effects of individual psychological changes spreading through social networks. When people become more emotionally regulated, less reactive, and more compassionate through contemplative practice, these qualities naturally influence their interactions with family, friends, colleagues, and community members. Take a breath and consider how this understanding might apply to your own experience. Have you noticed that when you're in a particularly calm, centered state of mind, the people around you seem to respond differently? This isn't quantum entanglement at work. It's the entirely natural process of emotional states and behavioral patterns influencing each other through facial expressions, vocal tones, body language, and the countless subtle ways consciousness communicates its condition to other conscious beings. Let's explore something fascinating about how individual consciousness interacts with the larger systems part. While of which your thoughts don't directly manipulate quantum fields, they do influence complex networks of relationship, culture, and shared meaning that extend far beyond your individual experience. Understanding these actual mechanisms of influence reveals possibilities for positive impact that are both more realistic and more inspiring than any quantum manifestation theory. When you engage in practices that cultivate clarity, compassion, and emotional regulation, you're not just changing your own neural activity, you're altering the quality of every interaction you have with other conscious beings. These changes ripple outward through social networks in ways that can influence the emotional climate of entire communities, though the mechanisms remain entirely classical rather than quantum mechanical. Consider the phenomenon of emotional contagion, the well-documented tendency for emotional states to spread between people through unconscious mimicry of facial expressions, vocal patterns, and body language. When you maintain a calm, centered presence, others in your vicinity unconsciously mirror aspects of that state, potentially experiencing reduced stress and increased clarity themselves. This process operates through mirror neurons, specialized brain cells that fire both when you perform an action and when you observe others performing the same action. These neurons, discovered through entirely conventional neuroscience research, help explain how emotional states, intentions, and even contemplative awareness can transmit between individuals without requiring any quantum mechanical connections. As you reflect on this understanding, notice how it locates the power of consciousness within the actual constraints of biology and psychology, rather than in impossible quantum effects. The influence is real and measurable, but it operates through social and neurological channels that science can study and understand. The implications become even more interesting when we consider how individual, contemplative practice might influence larger cultural patterns. When increasing numbers of people develop skills in emotional regulation, conflict resolution, and compassionate communication, these abilities can gradually shift the norms and expectations within entire communities. This cultural transmission of contemplative values doesn't require quantum consciousness to be transformative. It operates through the same mechanisms by which any cultural innovation spreads: modeling, teaching, social reinforcement, and the gradual establishment of new behavioral norms that become self-sustaining within communities. Some research has explored whether communities with higher concentrations of meditation practitioners show different patterns in various social indicators. While the findings remain preliminary and controversial, with no scientific consensus on causation, they suggest possibilities for positive social influence that operate through entirely natural processes of individual psychological development affecting collective behavior. The key insight is that consciousness, while unable to directly manipulate external reality through quantum mechanisms, exists within webs of relationship and influence that create genuine opportunities for positive impact. Your mental state affects your behavior, which influences your relationships, which shape your community's emotional climate, which contributes to larger cultural patterns that can extend across generations. This understanding provides a more realistic foundation for social engagement and community building than quantum manifestation theories offer. Instead of trying to change the world through impossible consciousness effects on physical reality, you can focus on the actual pathways through which individual awareness influences collective well-being. Here's something remarkable about human consciousness that doesn't require quantum mechanical explanations to be profound: the capacity to create meaning from experience through the sophisticated architecture of memory, emotion, and narrative construction. This meaning-making process, operating entirely through classical neural mechanisms, represents one of the most extraordinary capabilities of biological information processing systems. When you experience something beautiful, challenging, or transformative, your brain doesn't just record the event as raw data. It integrates the experience with existing memories, emotional associations, and conceptual frameworks, creating rich networks of meaning that influence how you interpret future experiences and make decisions about how to live. This process of meaning construction reveals something profound about the relationship between consciousness and reality. While your thoughts don't directly control external events through quantum effects, they do powerfully shape the subjective reality you experience through the sophisticated ways your brain processes, interprets, and remembers information. Take a moment to consider your own experience of meaningful moments in your life. Notice how these experiences often involve not just pleasant feelings, but a sense of connection to something larger than your individual concerns. This feeling of connection doesn't require quantum entanglement to be genuine. It emerges from the natural capacity of consciousness to recognize patterns, relationships, and significance within the complex systems of which it's a part. The neuroscience of meaning reveals networks in the brain that integrate information from multiple sources: sensory input, emotional processing, memory systems, and areas involved in social cognition and moral reasoning. When these networks operate in harmony, they create the subjective experience of significance, purpose, and connection that characterizes meaningful experience. This scientific understanding of meaning-making provides a foundation for cultivating more fulfilling and purposeful life experiences without requiring belief in impossible quantum consciousness effects. By understanding how the brain constructs meaning, you can engage more skillfully with practices and experiences that support this natural process. Contemplative traditions have long recognized that meaning emerges from the quality of attention and intention you bring to experience, rather than from external circumstances alone. This insight aligns perfectly with neuroscientific findings about how consciousness shapes subjective reality through the sophisticated ways it processes and interprets information. The practices that cultivate meaning, gratitude, service to others, creative expression, contemplative reflection, work through entirely natural psychological mechanisms that don't require quantum mechanical validation. They optimize the brain's meaning-making systems, creating richer, more satisfying subjective experiences while contributing positively to the lives of others and the larger community. As you contemplate this perspective, notice how it might change your approach to finding purpose and significance in daily life. Rather than trying to manifest meaning through quantum consciousness effects, you can focus on cultivating the actual conditions that support the brain's natural capacity for creating meaningful experience. In our final exploration, let's consider consciousness not as an isolated phenomenon trying to control quantum fields, but as part of the larger ecology of mind that includes all the ways awareness participates in the complex systems of life, culture, and cosmos. This ecological perspective reveals possibilities for significance and connection that are both more realistic and more inspiring than any quantum manifestation theory. Your consciousness doesn't exist in isolation. It emerged from and remains embedded within nested systems of relationship. Biological networks that support neural function, social networks that shape identity and values, cultural networks that transmit meaning across generations, and ultimately the cosmic processes that gave rise to complexity, life, and awareness itself. Understanding consciousness as ecological rather than controlling shifts the entire question from how can I manipulate reality through quantum effects to how can I participate more skillfully in the larger systems of which I'm already a part. This shift opens pathways for genuine influence and contribution that operate within the actual constraints of how consciousness functions. When you engage in practices that cultivate wisdom, compassion, and skillful action, you're not just improving your individual well-being, you're contributing to the larger ecology of consciousness that includes all sentient beings. These contributions don't require quantum mechanical explanations to be meaningful. They represent genuine participation in the ongoing evolution of complexity, awareness, and care within the universe. The implications extend beyond individual practice to questions about humanity's role in cosmic evolution. If consciousness represents the universe's capacity for self-reflection, then the development of wisdom traditions, scientific understanding, and contemplative practices becomes a way of participating in cosmic self-awareness itself. This perspective provides a foundation for genuine spiritual significance that doesn't depend on misunderstanding physics. You are not separate from the cosmic processes that created you. You are expressions of the universe's capacity for complexity, beauty, and self-reflection. This understanding locates human consciousness within the grand narrative of cosmic evolution without requiring supernatural explanations. As you breathe deeply and prepare for our journey to conclude, take a moment to sense yourself as part of this larger ecology of consciousness. Feel the air moving in and out of your lungs. Notice the complex biological processes supporting your awareness. Consider the social and cultural networks that shaped your understanding, and contemplate the cosmic processes that made your existence possible. This isn't quantum consciousness controlling reality, it's something more profound, consciousness recognizing its place within the larger systems that created it and finding meaning through skillful participation in their ongoing evolution. The practices that support this recognition, meditation, contemplation, service to others, creative expression, work through entirely natural mechanisms while contributing to the larger ecology of wisdom and compassion that spans generations and cultures. The quantum reality glitch that prevents manifestation isn't a limitation of human potential. It's an invitation to discover what consciousness can actually accomplish when it operates within, rather than attempting to transcend the natural constraints of reality. Within those constraints lie possibilities for growth, meaning, and positive influence that are far more reliable and satisfying than any quantum promises could provide. In the end, the universe revealed by science offers something more valuable than the ability to manifest desired outcomes through impossible quantum effects. It offers the opportunity to participate consciously and skillfully in the ongoing cosmic process of complexity, awareness, and care emerging from the fundamental structures of reality itself. Thank you for joining me in this gentle exploration of consciousness, quantum physics, and the beautiful complexity of being aware in a universe governed by discoverable principles rather than wishful thinking. Your attention and openness to these ideas represents exactly the kind of conscious participation in cosmic evolution that makes existence meaningful without requiring supernatural explanations. As we draw together the threads of our exploration, something remarkable emerges from the intersection of authentic quantum physics and genuine contemplative wisdom. Not the false promises of reality manipulation, but something far more profound, a recognition that both quantum mechanics and contemplative practice point toward the fundamental role of observation and awareness in how we understand and navigate existence itself. The quantum world demonstrates that the act of measurement fundamentally changes the relationship between observer and observed, not because consciousness controls reality, but because any interaction with a quantum system necessarily disturbs it through purely physical processes. This isn't mystical, it's mechanical. Yet it reveals something important about the limits of objective observation and the participatory nature of knowledge itself. Similarly, contemplative traditions have long recognized that the quality of awareness we bring to experience shapes what we discover. When you observe your own mental processes with sustained attention, you're not controlling those processes through quantum effects, but you are participating in a kind of inner measurement that reveals patterns and possibilities that might otherwise remain hidden. Take a moment to breathe and notice how this parallel might illuminate your own experience. The precision required for quantum measurement mirrors, in some ways, the precision of attention cultivated in contemplative practice. Both require sustained focus, careful methodology, and acceptance that the very act of investigation changes the relationship between the investigator and what's being investigated. This convergence points toward what we might call participatory knowing, approaches to understanding that acknowledge the observer as part of the system being studied rather than separate from it. In quantum mechanics, this recognition led to new mathematical frameworks for describing measurement and information. In contemplative practice, it leads to insights about the constructed nature of subjective experience and the possibility of refining the instruments of awareness itself. The neuroscience research we've explored throughout our journey reveals measurable changes in brain function that result from sustained contemplative practice. These changes don't violate any laws of physics, but they do demonstrate the remarkable plasticity of the systems that generate consciousness. Through entirely natural neurological processes, awareness can literally reshape its own substrate, optimizing attention, emotional regulation, and cognitive clarity. Some interpretations suggest this neuroplasticity might reflect deeper principles about how complex systems can reorganize themselves through sustained intention and practice. While this remains speculative rather than proven science, it points toward possibilities for human development that operate within rather than transcending natural constraints. As you contemplate these ideas, notice how they locate the power of contemplative practice within the actual capabilities of consciousness, rather than in impossible quantum effects. The transformation is real and measurable, but it occurs through the sophisticated ways awareness can modify its own operational parameters rather than through direct manipulation of external reality. Here's where our understanding of consciousness and quantum mechanics reveals something truly extraordinary about the nature of information itself. Both domains deal fundamentally with how information is processed, transmitted, and transformed through complex systems. This isn't coincidence, it's pointing towards something deep about the structure of reality at multiple scales. In quantum mechanics, information takes on properties that seem almost alive. Quantum states can exist in superposition, where multiple possibilities coexist until measurement forces a definite outcome. Information can become entangled across space, creating correlations that persist regardless of distance. These phenomena reveal that information isn't just abstract data, it's a fundamental feature of how reality organizes itself at the quantum level. Consciousness operates through equally sophisticated information processing, though at entirely different scales and through classical rather than quantum mechanisms. Your brain processes vast streams of sensory data, integrates them with memory and expectation, and constructs the coherent experience of being aware in a meaningful world. This construction happens so seamlessly that we rarely notice the extraordinary complexity involved. The parallel becomes even more intriguing when we consider how both quantum systems and conscious systems demonstrate what we might call creative emergence. Simple quantum rules give rise to the incredible diversity of atomic and molecular behavior. Simple neural processes give rise to the rich complexity of conscious experience. In both cases, basic components following fundamental principles generate phenomena that seem to transcend their individual limitations. This pattern of emergence appears throughout nature, from the formation of galaxies to the evolution of ecosystems, to the development of human cultures. Complex systems organized according to natural principles spontaneously develop properties and capabilities that weren't present in their individual components. Consciousness represents one of the most remarkable examples of this emergent complexity, where neural networks processing information according to biological constraints give rise to subjective experience, creativity, and the capacity for wonder itself. As you reflect on this perspective, consider how it might change your understanding of your place in the cosmic order. You are not separate from these natural processes of emergence and complexity. You are one of their most sophisticated expressions. The same principles that govern quantum information processing and cosmic evolution also operate in the neural networks that generate your awareness and capacity for meaning-making. Some researchers speculate that these parallels between quantum information processing and consciousness might reflect deeper connections between mind and the fundamental structure of reality. While no scientific consensus supports these ideas, they point toward intriguing possibilities about how awareness might participate in the larger information of the universe itself. This processing capacity remains speculative territory rather than established science, but it suggests ways of thinking about consciousness that honour both its natural emergence from biological processes and its participation in cosmic patterns of complexity and organisation. The mystery isn't that consciousness controls quantum fields, but that information processing systems can become sophisticated enough to contemplate their own nature and participate consciously in ongoing cosmic evolution. What emerges when we ground contemplative practice in this scientific understanding of consciousness as cosmic information processing rather than quantum field manipulation? Something both more humble and more inspiring than manifestation theory promises: authentic ways of participating consciously in the ongoing evolution of complexity, awareness, and care within the universe. The meditation practices that have been refined over millennia don't require quantum mechanical explanations to be transformative. They work by optimizing the actual information processing capabilities of consciousness through entirely natural neuroplastic changes. When you cultivate sustained attention, you're not controlling external reality through quantum effects, but you are refining one of the universe's most sophisticated information processing systems: your own awareness. Yes, this refinement has ripple effects that extend far beyond individual well-being. As we've explored, the quality of your consciousness influences every interaction you have with other aware beings. These influences operate through classical channels of emotional contagion, social modeling, and cultural transmission, but they represent genuine participation in the larger ecology of consciousness that spans communities and generations. Take a breath and consider what this understanding might mean for your own contemplative practice. Whether you meditate, pray, engage in creative expression, or simply try to live with greater awareness and compassion, you're participating in the universe's capacity for self-reflection and conscious evolution. This participation doesn't require supernatural abilities to be meaningful. The practices themselves can be understood as applied neuroscience, systematic methods for optimizing the brain's natural capacities for attention, emotional regulation, and clear thinking. The fact that these techniques were developed through centuries of careful observation rather than modern laboratory research doesn't diminish their effectiveness. Contemplative traditions represent humanity's longest-running experiments in consciousness research. Recent neuroscience has begun to validate many insights from these traditional approaches while revealing the mechanisms through which they operate. Mindfulness meditation enhances activity in brain networks associated with present moment awareness, while reducing default mode network activity linked to rumination and self-referential thinking. Loving kindness practices increase activity in areas associated with empathy and social connection. These changes occur through entirely natural processes of neuroplasticity and don't require quantum explanations. Some research has explored whether communities with higher concentrations of contemplative practitioners show different patterns in various social indicators. While the findings remain preliminary and controversial, with no scientific consensus on causation, they suggest possibilities for positive social influence that operate through natural processes of individual psychological development affecting collective behavior rather than through impossible quantum consciousness effects. The key insight is that contemplative practice, properly understood, becomes a way of participating more skillfully in the actual systems and processes of which consciousness is already a part. Instead of trying to transcend natural constraints, you're learning to work more effectively within them while contributing to the larger evolution of awareness and wisdom that spans human cultures and potentially beyond. As our contemplative journey approaches its natural completion, let's explore how it might influence the quality and scope of care we extend to the world around us. When awareness recognizes itself as part of larger beautiful happens within systems rather than separate from them, something to our sense of responsibility and connection. The ecological perspective on consciousness that we've been developing reveals care as a natural, emergent property of sufficiently complex information processing systems. When awareness becomes sophisticated enough to model not just external reality, but the internal states of other conscious beings, empathy and compassion arise as inevitable consequences of this modeling capacity. This isn't quantum entanglement between minds, but something equally remarkable: the natural development of concern for others that emerges when consciousness becomes aware of itself as part of larger systems of relationship and interdependence. The neuroscience of empathy reveals specific brain networks that allow us to simulate and respond to the experiences of other conscious beings through entirely classical mechanisms. As you contemplate your own experience of care and concern for others, notice how it often extends beyond immediate self-interest to include the well-being of family, community, and sometimes even abstract future generations or distant strangers. This expansion of care doesn't require quantum consciousness to be meaningful. It reflects the natural tendency of complex systems to develop properties that support the larger systems of which they're parts. Some interpretations suggest that this expanding circle of care might represent consciousness participating in its own evolution, developing greater capacity for complexity, integration, and responsiveness to the needs of larger systems. While this remains speculative rather than proven science, it points toward possibilities for human development that operate through natural psychological and social processes. The contemplative traditions have long recognized this expansion of care as both a natural outcome of spiritual development and a practice that can be consciously cultivated. Techniques for developing compassion, from loving kindness meditation to service practices, work by systematically training the brain's empathy networks and reward systems to find satisfaction in contributing to others' well-being. This training occurs through entirely natural processes of neuroplasticity and social learning, but it can produce profound shifts in motivation and behavior that extend far beyond individual benefit. When increasing numbers of people develop these capacities, the effects can influence entire cultural patterns through the same mechanisms by which any behavioral innovation spreads through communities. The scientific understanding of these processes provides a foundation for approaches to social change that work with rather than against natural psychological and social dynamics. Instead of trying to transform the world through impossible quantum consciousness effects, we can focus on the actual pathways through which individual contemplative development influences collective well-being. This perspective suggests that the cultivation of consciousness, the development of wisdom and compassion, represents genuine contribution to cosmic evolution itself. Not through supernatural mechanisms, but through the entirely natural process of complex systems becoming more aware, more integrated, and more capable of responding skillfully to the needs of the larger systems of which they're parts. And so we reach the quiet close of our exploration, having travelled through the precise mathematics of quantum mechanics, the sophisticated neuroscience of consciousness, and the beautiful recognition that reality offers us something far more profound than the ability to bend it to our will. The quantum reality glitch that prevents manifestation isn't a cosmic oversight or limitation of human potential. It's a feature, not a bug, revealing a universe that operates according to discoverable principles rather than wishful thinking. What we've uncovered isn't a diminishment of wonder, but its deepest source. Consciousness emerging from the dance of neurons and shaped by millions of years of evolution, represents one of the cosmos' most remarkable achievements. You don't need to control quantum fields to be extraordinary. You already are the universe reflecting on itself through the intricate biological systems that generate your awareness. The practices that genuinely transform us, meditation, compassion, skillful attention, work not through impossible quantum effects, but through the brain's natural capacity to reshape itself. This neuroplasticity, grounded in chemistry and physics, offers reliable pathways to clarity and wisdom that don't depend on supernatural claims to be meaningful. As you step away from this conversation, perhaps the most beautiful realization is that you are already participating in the ongoing evolution of cosmic complexity and care. Every moment of awareness, every act of kindness, every instance of wonder contributes to the larger story of matter organizing itself into forms capable of love, beauty, and the endless search for understanding. Thank you for sharing this gentle journey through the landscapes of mind and matter. Until we meet again in this quiet corner where science meets wonder, may your awareness be clear, your curiosity alive, and your journey through the genuine mysteries of existence filled with authentic awe. The universe is calling, not through quantum fields that bend to our thoughts, but through the extraordinary gift of being conscious in a cosmos that somehow gave rise to consciousness itself.